Our distinguished speaker today is Professor Ardalan Vahidi. He is now a full professor in mechanical engineering at Clemson University. He received his PhD from the University of Michigan in mechanical engineering, MS degrees from George Washington University and Sharif in Tehran, actually both in civil engineering, right? And he's held some interesting positions in addition to being a professor. He was a visiting scientist at the BMW Technology Office here in California, and most recently at IFP Novell, just outside Paris. He's had many very influential papers on hybrid electric vehicles, electrified vehicles in general, and more recently connected and autonomous vehicles. In fact, I was just looking up, he's got, despite his youth, he's got, I think, 11 papers with over 100 citations and like 2 or 3 that have over 500 citations. So, it's been very influential with his work. So I, for one, am super excited to have Ardalan here. And let's give him a hand as he shares his work with us.
Thanks everyone for being here today. It's a pleasure to be back at Berkeley. I was here on sabbatical 2012 and 13, and it's good to see some of you that I met then and talk to you. Today I'm going to talk about optimal coordination of connected and autonomous cars in sort of future cities that are smart. For those of you who don't follow football, Clemson is in South Carolina, near Atlanta, 2 hours drive. I'm in the mechanical engineering department with 32 faculty, 900 undergraduate students, and 200 graduate students. The university has 23,000 students. Over the past, I've been there since 2005, 12 years now, time flies. And over the past decade, I've been working on, as Scott said, hybrid electric vehicles, and mostly on how information about upcoming events down the road, for example, a hill coming up, can help you do better in energy efficiency. For conventional vehicles, how information about traffic signals and traffic flow can help you improve your energy efficiency. This is for on-road vehicles. More recently, we have also been looking at off-road vehicles. If you have information about the elevation map, soil map, and we want to use it for route guidance, how do we do it in a computational efficient manner? But today I'm going to focus mostly on traffic signals and how that information can help us improve energy efficiency of vehicles. Now, this is traffic in LA last year, I think. And if you have the most efficient vehicle automated in that traffic, it's not going to help you. You're going to lose fuel, you're going to be frustrated and lose time. So to improve on energy efficiency, we need to think outside of the car. We need to think about the system, because even with autonomy, there is some good arguments that say if your car is autonomous, your vehicle miles traveled may increase, the user group may increase, and congestion problem may be even more. So we need to have the right policies to avoid that kind of scenarios, and I'm not a policy person. But the other thing we can do is to coordinate the motion of cars with infrastructure and with each other. My focus is energy efficiency, but also to make congestion less. For example, one opportunity that exists is in traffic lights. The National Traffic Signal Report Card that comes out every once in a while, the 2012, gave almost a failing grade to most of the things that are done about traffic lights in the US: management, traffic signal operations, signal timing practices, traffic monitoring and data collection got an F grade. So we have a lot of room for improvement. Delays at traffic signals add 5 to 10% to all traffic delay, or 295 million vehicle hours of delay, according to the reference that was on the previous page. And benefit to cost ratio of traffic signal management exceeds 40 to 1. So with that in mind, over the past few years, we have looked at transmitting information about the signal phase and timing to connected cars to help them drive more energy efficiently. We've also looked at how information from connected cars sent to the traffic signal or the traffic management system can help us improve the flow of traffic. Ideally, when there's two-way communication, you can do even better. And in a very ideal scenario where all cars are autonomous, very futuristically, you may not even need traffic lights. the first and the third topic I'm going to talk about today. So back in 2008 or 9, I had a master's student who was going to write a thesis, and I was trying to come up with a simple problem that I could solve in 1 year. And I didn't know that it's going to continue to become one of my core research areas. And that was, I told the student, let's say you're going down the street, and there are 3 traffic lights. And you know where the traffic lights are, and you know when they're going to be red and green. So the x-axis is time. So as a function of time, we know when these lights are going to be red and green. We know that idling behind the light is not good for energy efficiency, so we want to find a trajectory that minimizes your idling times. Now, this could be a simple rule-based approach if you just look at the first light ahead of you. If you look at multiple lights, you can get better solution if you use an optimization-based approach or an optimal control approach. And the idea was to find this trajectory. Now, I know it's Friday evening, and you're probably tired, but let's go and do some quizzes, okay? So, let's say you have a light in front of you, like 200 meters ahead, and you know it's going to turn green in 20 seconds. If you want to be energy optimal, how do you drive toward that light? What's the best strategy? Do you go smoothly? Do you accelerate? Do you decelerate? Do you coast? What do you do?
Look for optimum velocity. Seek out optimum velocity.
Find optimal
velocity.
velocity.
Slow down and speed up.
Yes, if you can find a velocity that gets you to the green, of course you have to speed up or speed down to that speed, but then takes you to get you to the green, that's the best. Maybe also I break it down a little bit. Let's forget about traffic signals for a while. Let's say we want to go from point A to B with a car. Let's not worry about the powertrain role right here. The engine could be combustion engine or electric cars. Let's not worry about that side. Let's say we have some energy at the vehicle and we want to spend it optimally. Let's say my velocity is 0 and I want to reach a stop sign and reach a velocity of 0. What's the best way to do that? What's the energy optimal way to do that? Do you accelerate as hard as possible?
You slow down until everything's right.
But if your velocity is 0 in the beginning, you have to accelerate. Then the answer is that you have to accelerate as hard as possible, because it's not if you formulate it as an optimal control problem, the Hamiltonian would be a fine function with control input, and you get a bang-bang solution. But let's look a little bit deeper. This is just the energy that you have at the wheel is EW. You use it in changing your kinetic energy that you don't have any control over. If you have set initial and final velocity, the first term is set. The second change is in potential energy. If you have elevation changes, that you cannot change either, because the beginning and end point are given to you. mg_CR delta x is the energy you lose to rolling resistance. If you pick the route and your tires are fixed, you cannot change that. So that's something that you cannot change if you want to do echo driving. Only the last term, which is a function of velocity squared, that's a drag term, you have control over. And when you have integral of velocity squared, you can write it as the average velocity squared plus variance of the speed over distance. And what you want to do, you want to minimize that. Here, assuming you don't use braking, okay? So you want to go with the lowest average speed. So if you're given long time, you can go as slow as possible. But if your time is fixed, your speed is kind of specified to you. So you want to minimize your variance in the speed. So you want to go constant speed from if your initial and final speed are the same. So just go constant speed, and that saves you energy. Okay? What if the initial speed is 0, the final speed is 0? That becomes an optimal control problem. As I said, it's bang bang, and here is the solution. Assuming we don't have regenerative braking, we have conventional brakes. Here I'm going the distance, I specified that I have to go different distances in 60 seconds. You have velocity versus time. The area under each curve is the distance between the 2 points I'm trying to cover. The distance is small, you go constant speed with a small area of coasting at the end. As I increase the speed, the constant speed section decreases in length in time, and you have longer coasting. And what is interesting is that as speed goes up, periods of maximal braking are added to the end. So depending on the situation, you may have maximal acceleration, constant speed, coasting, and maximal braking, which is not completely intuitive. And this applies to a vehicle, to a train, or to a UAV, okay? Because all of them deal with drag. This is only to minimize drag. I didn't consider the role of powertrain. A driver that does not do this, goes with constant speed and does not take advantage of coasting, can increase its energy use by 25% depending on what distance is covered. So this can be significant. That's quiz 1. Now let's try quiz 2. Let's hear more answers, okay? Is there a difference between an electric car and a combustion engine car in the trajectory that you should have when doing this maneuver? Okay, the answer is yes. Okay, the answer is yes. For electric cars, because the cost is not is a quadratic function of the control input, your Hamiltonian would be a quadratic function of the control input. So velocity ends up being a parabolic function of time. If you don't have constraints, if you have constraints, it becomes more complex. I won't go into that. This is the work of my collaborator. Over the summer, I was in France. I was working with these fantastic guys, Ji-Hoon Han and Antonio Sciaretta on the same problem, fundamental of energy efficient driving. But like on the conventional car, even when you go constant cruising, it's best, according to optimal control and common sense, because of the way the engines are, to pulse and glide. Meaning to turn the engine, because the engine at medium loads is not the most efficient. You want to operate it at high power and then turn the engine off and repeat this process. Ideally, infinitely fast. So we want to do pulse and glide very fast. It's called chattering control in the flight control literature that I found from many years ago. But you want to turn the engine on and off. And I know this is not very comfortable. This is disruptive to traffic. That's why we don't do it. But if you want to do fuel optimal, that's the right way of doing things. And the period should be very, very fast, but because it's not practical, we can have a finite period, like maybe 30 seconds or 60 seconds. That results in, as you see in the top plot, variations in velocity. But that we know, as I said before, is not good for drag, because variance in velocity is not good. So there is a trade-off, okay? You can do pulse and glide, but you have to have aerodynamic drag in mind. Here I'm showing for going at a city speed of like 15 meters per second. The period of pulse and glide, as I increase it, the fuel efficiency gain drops, but it could be as high as 30%. At 60 seconds even period, you have 30%. As you increase that, the effective drag increases, and then that benefit dies away. We haven't done an experiment on this, but we have done the optimal control. And you don't even have to do optimal control. You can just reason, as I said. Okay? So that's the fuel optimal approach. But in the rest of this talk, for the reason that we want to have comfortable rides and not be disruptive to traffic, I won't follow this approach. So my approach would be suboptimal. Okay? So in a traffic signal problem, the cost function that I use is a suboptimal approach. The cost function penalizes so we discretize the distance and penalize the travel times, scaled by some minimum travel time. We penalize the acceleration to have a smooth ride. Also, penalizing acceleration will discourage use of brakes, so that's good for fuel efficiency. And the last term, basically epsilon is a small number. So 1 over epsilon is a large number. C is a number that is either 0 or 1. When there is no light, it's 0. At the location of the traffic light, and when the light is red, that C is 1. So you have a large cost that penalizes your stopping at the location and time of the red signal. Sometimes we may not have deterministic knowledge about the time of the light. So we may know the probability of green. So then we formulated a deterministic cost function, but in the last term, instead of 1 over epsilon, we have log of probability of green. So probability of green is 1, log of 1 is 0, the last term drops. If probability of green is 0, meaning the light is 100% red, you have an infinite term at the end, which discourages stopping at a red signal again. Okay? So that's the idea. So first we started with simulations in 2009. This is in our local city, Greenville, South Carolina. We obtained traffic signal timing for fixed signals along the road, 10 of them. And we simulated a baseline car that drives like we do. At that time, we called it a PCC car, predictive cruise control car, that had access to the timing of the lights. And we tried to minimize the idling intervals. And of course, the results depends on initial conditions. But for example, for this initial condition, when we ran the velocity profile through high fidelity vehicle models, we saw that with no information, just going through these 10 lights and not on average, we get 19 miles per gallon, while with full information, we get 28 miles per gallon. To cover many scenarios, we also did a Monte Carlo simulation, also considering probabilistic information of the light. That was a case study only. Running 3,000 simulations with different initial conditions with no information going through, I don't remember, it was 3 or 10 lights. With no information, we did 23 miles per gallon, with full information, 30 miles per gallon, and with probabilistic real-time information, 26 or 27 miles per gallon. So the numbers were encouraging. So in 2012, when I was on sabbatical here at Berkeley, I also worked with BMW Technology Office to bring this technology into the vehicle. BMW had access to traffic signal timings from the traffic control center in the city of San Jose for the 1,000 traffic lights that are in there. So we defined a loop that goes through 10 lights, and we did testing in mixed traffic using a BMW 5 Series. Here I'm showing the results for 4 BMW drivers that were driving these vehicles. We couldn't add drivers from outside, and company policy wouldn't let us do. The drivers had 1 hour driving with the system inactive and 1 hour with the system being active. On average, the improvement in mixed traffic was 9%. And 9% is a big deal for our auto industry. For every 1% improvement in energy efficiency, they're ready to add $100 to the price tag of their cars. So if your 9% is consistent, this is only in a city. It's not going to be 9% everywhere. But with 9%, you can add $900 to the price tag of your car. Okay? Let's see the system in action. This was actually in San Francisco on Van Ness Street. So the driver is shown a spectrum green and red. If you keep the speed in green, you go through a green light. In the front panel, it shows a countdown to the next light. Basically, as you approach a light, the vehicle subscribes to that light and starts receiving information about the timing of that light. And it shows the speed advisory to the driver. Also, there's a camera that detects if there are cars are in front. My student decided that if there's a car in front waiting, he disables the advisory system because he's trying to graduate and wanted to make it simple. But you can use the camera information in other ways as well. So again, you can see this situation here. It first gives the speed advisory, but I think that stop vehicle disables the advisory to the Now, one more thing I want you to notice here. While in San Jose, the timings that we would broadcast a driver are perfect, in San Francisco, they're not. As you can see, sometimes there's 1 or 2 seconds difference between when I say the light is green and the light turns green. The reason was that in San Francisco, we didn't have access to the traffic control center timings. I mean, we had timing cards for the lights that we know that on Van Ness, these are at that time, they're fixed time, I know. But the signal clock would drift during the day, so we could not rely only on the timing cards. So one of my functions at BMW Takeoff was to see if it's possible to crowdsource the timing of the light. And I've had discussions with Pravin about this, and I know he doesn't like it because there are alternative good ways of doing this. But this is just an exploratory research to see if it's possible to get the timing of the lights by crowdsourcing. Now, BMW wouldn't give me any data, so I had to find my own data. I spent 2 weeks just looking around, and then I came up with this freely available data source of Next Bus. So each bus in San Francisco at that time, I don't know what it is today, broadcasts its GPS position, velocity, heading, and time stamp every 200 meters or 90 seconds, whichever comes first. So it's very sparse. And you know, a bus comes every 10 minutes, and then the update races. So it's not very promising. If you put the velocity versus position of a bus, it's very sparse. But then we thought, okay, let's try and put things together. Okay, if more buses go by and put the data together, after a few days you can see patterns. And where the buses come to stop, that's an intersection or a bus stop. And we use very simple heuristic methods to try to estimate the red time, the green time, the cycle time, and more about these traffic lights. Notice that these traffic lights are fixed time, so they're not adaptive. Okay, so there's some hope here. So for example, this was not on Madness, this was a different street, but just for demo. We look at an intersection, and we look at a box right before and right after intersection, and selected buses that send an update in these boxes. So we had timestamps for those buses. There are not many, by the way. And then we subtract the time, and if that is not consistent with the velocity of the bus, that is longer than what the bus would go with the recorded velocity, we infer that the bus probably stopped at the intersection for a while. And we projected that the profile was like that. Velocity, initial velocity went with constant speed, decelerated with an average acceleration, a deceleration that we crowdsourced also, stopped for a while, accelerated to reach the final speed that we were reading. And then we inferred how long the bus was stopped. We did histogram over 2 weeks or a month, and the maximum in this histogram is like 65 seconds. Even better, we could look at different times of the day and look particularly early hours, midnight to 5 a.m. and 18 on, then there's less traffic on the road, and as you see, the maximums there are 60 seconds. The rate interval for this signal was 60 seconds. And for most signals, we were able to consistently do that, get the red times. Another challenge is cycle times. So we looked at 2 buses that came, and they could do 1 hour or 2 hours apart. But what we said, if they stop, their starting point from that start moving, if you subtract that from each other, it should be an integer multiple of cycle times, assuming fixed cycle times, which was the case here. And so we tried different cycle times and obtained the cycle time that gives us minimum remainder when we do the division. Okay, so we tried, so this is a brute force approach, trying cycle times of 1 second, 2 seconds, all the way to 150 seconds. And this is the model I use. I don't get into it. For example, these are 4 examples you probably cannot see. We plot the histogram of the remainder of division by candidate cycle times, and here 90 seconds will give us the most centered around 0. So we thought that the cycle time of this light is 90 seconds, and exactly was 90 seconds. So we did this for a couple of lights on Van Ness Street, Lombard, Filbert, Green, Broadway, and Washington intersection. And for cycle times, we were almost always right on, except for one case, which we got half of the value. And for red times, most of the times we were successful. My student Ali, who worked on this, later improved this by considering queue length and where the bus is in the queue, and improved this even further in a follow-up publication. He had better results. I have the old results here. We were able to do more. For example, on that same street, the offset between the traffic lights changes at 6 a.m., 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 7 p.m. We looked at variance of our prediction of start of green, and that only happens on weekdays, not weekends. You see there's a spark there that correlates exactly to where the offset change happens. So we were able to detect the offset change, and also the amount of offset change using like a mixed Gaussian mixture model, and seeing what those k-ns, the bumps are, 30 seconds, and that was the offset. The details are in that paper. I don't want to bore you with that. My student Ali was very good. We spent a lot of times on Van Ness Avenue. There's a bar around the corner. We sat and looked at the actual timing of the light and clicked on our computer to record it for like half of a day. And that's the actual timing and the estimated timing. And so we developed this web interface that showed the estimated versus the actual. On the left, it shows the last buses that passed and their position in the queue and whenever it could be inferred. And this is the green is from the histogram of passages through green. I don't want to get into it. So he developed this interface, and we could monitor how well our system is doing. Where could this be useful? This happened in San Francisco last year, where an Uber autonomous car passed a red light almost hitting a pedestrian. If Uber had a system like this in place, probably this could have been avoided. I mean, that's my marketing. And whenever I show this research, people also ask, if you give traffic signal advisory to vehicles, what is the impact on other vehicles? So we did some simulations in Paramix, which is a traffic micro-simulation tool. Here the white cars are regular cars. Green cars are programmed to receive the timing of the lights and choose a speed to go through green. And we estimated their fuel consumption by passing their velocity trajectory to a simple model. Okay? Not very sophisticated. Here's the result for fuel consumption. So the x-axis is penetration of vehicles equipped with speed advisory system or connected vehicles from 0% to 100%. And the vertical axis is fuel consumption in milliliter. And so you can see that equipped vehicles have lower fuel consumption than conventional vehicles. But the interesting trend here is that as the percentage of the vehicles equipped with speed advisory system increases, the fuel consumptions of regular vehicles improves because they get trapped behind these vehicles and their fuel consumption improves. Now, you see different results of different vehicle per hour per lane, and those are different, but the trend here is interesting. We also looked at traffic flow by measuring it across, by putting sensors in the software and measuring it across 4 intersections. And traffic flow was slightly negatively influenced, so it went from 100% to 95%. And the travel times are slightly increased depending on the penetration level between conventional and connected vehicles. Now I know Pravin has a paper that says if you platoon these vehicles together, you get better results, you increase signal, basic intersection throughput. Here we're not doing platooning, the algorithm was very, very vehicle-centric and not collaborating with others. So we got improvement in fuel efficiency, but flow and travel time slightly increased to the degree I think that can be tolerated. More recently, we're looking at a similar problem, a little bit more challenging, of car following. Today, we follow the car that is in front of us very reactively. If the car slams on brakes, we do that. Lane selection is also very ad hoc. We don't have a lot of information about what's happening in the adjacent lane because we don't know what's happening downstream. So we change lane kind of arbitrarily. The point is that with connectivity, you can have more information, and if you can anticipate how the car in front of us is going to drive, if you have information about that car a few seconds in advance, knowing that this driver is aggressive. And also, if you look at the traffic context, and we kind of fuse this data and predict over the next 10-second prediction horizon how this car is going to move, you can probably reduce the braking events and improve our energy efficiency. The same for lane selection. And that's something we have started to do. This paper has some early results. It's still shallow. We want to go deeper. We recently got a DOE grant to look at exactly the same problem, to come up with the algorithms for car following and lane selection, and then test them in a micro-simulation environment, and then do experiments over a 2-year period. Now, a little bit more to the future, more fun stuff, maybe not realistic stuff at this moment. What about the future where all cars are autonomous? Do we need traffic lights? Now, there was this paper out of UT Austin, Peter Stone's group in 2008 that showed that the cars can be treated as an agent, all autonomous, no intersection controller, no traffic light is needed. The cars can just go to the intersection like that. And got a lot of traction because of that. I didn't believe it at that time. I still don't think this is feasible, but this was a fun thing that we wanted to formalize a little bit more. And down there, you see, actually, that could be feasible. That's Tehran, where I am from, and the light is not working very well, and people managed. And actually, it's more efficient, you know? And there was this paper that probably you cannot see very well, the resolution is not high, from MIT in 2016 that talked about this idea again, and they did simulations to show some benefits, but there was no optimization involved. So we tried to basically do some form of optimization that is convertible. We were able to convert it to a mixed integer linear program. So the idea is that each vehicle is approached at the intersection, all vehicles, sends a subscription request to a server that sits somewhere near the intersection or remotely, just like the car that I showed you subscribe. The server collects all this information and then solves an optimization problem and gives each vehicle an access time to the intersection. And to ensure safety, if the intersection is a shaded area, we consider the bigger square, the size of which depends on the speed limits, and the higher the speed limit, the square grows. And we give each vehicle access time to the edge of this bigger square. So if the vehicle for some reason gets there and does not follow the recommendation, still has the opportunity to stop if another vehicle from the opposing direction is in the intersection. So there's enough stopping distance built into the system, okay? Now the objective, we want to minimize the largest access time. So the optimization variables are access times given to each vehicle. We want to minimize the largest access time among the n subscribed vehicles. So if you have 50 vehicles that subscribe, you're assigning 50 access times. The largest of this we want to minimize. So it's a min-max problem. But we also consider something, we don't want to be a dictator. We want it to be a little bit democratic. So we allow the vehicle to send to the intersection a desired access time based on their current speed. And the second part of the cost function also penalizes the deviation between assigned access time and the desired access time. And while in this current form it's not a linear program, by defining new variables, it's easily converted to a linear program, this problem. Okay, I won't go into that details, it's published. And on constraint side, for the vehicles that are on the same movement, we said the access time between the two vehicles should be more than a gap. First, we chose 1 second, but now we have a gap constraint that is dependent on the velocity of the vehicles, and, but still not very large because the vehicles can follow each other pretty closely. For the vehicles that are in the opposing direction, multiple scenarios can happen because we don't assume the first come, first serve idea. We want to optimize everything that's possible. So the access time of vehicle J minus access time of vehicle K should be more than a gap, which is like 7.5 seconds in this case, depending on the speed limit. Or the access time of the vehicle K minus access time of vehicle J should be more than 7.5 seconds. Now, this is an OR condition with a big M method. You can convert it to an AND condition. A binary variable is introduced for each constraint, which makes your linear program a mixed integer linear program. Okay? We also had feasibility in mind, basically saying the access time cannot be faster than what the vehicle can achieve. So we consider the maximum speed vehicle can go with, the maximum deceleration level of the vehicle and acceleration level, and we consider the access time we assign should be feasible. Still a linear program, mixed integer. Here's a MATLAB implementation just to show what happens. On the y-axis, you have the remaining distance at the time of subscription of different vehicles. The O is in one movement, and X is the opposing movement. And on the x-axis, you see time, and on the top x-axis, you see the assigned time to the vehicles to go to the intersection. And you see that the algorithm groups the circles together and x's together whenever it can. Now, MATLAB was not very efficient when we had 50 or more vehicles, so Ali, my student, wrote a Java code and used IBM Cplex package to solve this problem. For 50 vehicles, we have 50 optimization variables, 50 slack variables, 616 artificial binary variables, 1,400 constraints, and the execution time was 120 milliseconds, sometimes 800 milliseconds on a laptop or a PC. Here I'm comparing this scenario versus baseline scenarios A and B. In A, we have a fixed time intersection. In B, we have the same fixed time with the speed advisory. And in C, we don't have a traffic light. The same vehicle flow is injected to all three of them. So we replicate that. And we measured number of stops. The number of stops went from 1,100 to 11 in 1 hour of simulation. The total intersection stop delay went from 6 hours 41 minutes to 109 seconds. The average stop delay, you can see it, and the travel time is slightly improved from 2 minutes 30 seconds per vehicle to 2 minutes 15 seconds. Now, this was only simulation. We were interested to do some experiment, and it's difficult to put 50 cars on the road. So our idea was to do a vehicle in the loop simulation where one vehicle or a couple of vehicles interact with this simulation environment. So each of these vehicles communicate to even the simulated vehicles, communicate to the server using cellular communication. They send a subscription message, and every 6 seconds they receive their access time. The access times gets updated. Also the real vehicle. At that time, we didn't have an autonomous vehicle, so my student wrote an iPhone app that gives a very precise speed recommendation to the driver based on the access time it's assigned to. So the app basically is similar to the interface you saw in a BMW vehicle, but the speed advisory is very, very tight. So you can drive the vehicle like an autonomous vehicle very precisely. And that's the benefit of an autonomous one. We did the testing in an airport track that is not used anymore in Greenville, South Carolina. This is Ali who did most of the work. Basically marked an intersection with cones. The simulator is running in the car, but communicates with a server that was 40 miles away with cellular network. The app is in front, and then also the app communicates with the OBD2 port to measure the fuel that is used wirelessly. And as you can see, as the vehicle starts to approach that particular intersection, it subscribes to it and receives a recommendation on the speed. It's not subscribed, but as soon as it's subscribed, it shows the speed. And a mixed integer program, linear program, is solved every 6 seconds, and the results is sent to the vehicle and the simulated vehicles. And as you can see, the black vehicles are the simulated vehicles. The red dot is this vehicle, the real vehicle. And it's scheduled to pass the intersection. And I was there in the car in the 12 laps that we went. We didn't have to stop even a single time, although the traffic on the other side was significant. We did it also with 2 vehicles for some news coverage, and it worked. I just installed the app on my phone and just went in the car and it worked well. So this was not autonomous. For our DOE project, I have a collaborator at Clemson who is automating cars, and he has automated a Nissan Leaf. He wants to automate a conventional combustion engine car also. That's his work, and we want to use that in the car following. So we want to do a mix of simulated vehicles and real vehicles in car following, which is much more challenging, but we think we can make it happen. Of course, you may question about pedestrians and all those kind of things. I agree with you, and that's a scenario you may witness if you have this situation. Autonomous cars and not considering pedestrians. With that, I want to thank you and thank my group and collaborators who helped all during this work.